My name is Hawa Charfaray, and I am the CEO and founder of Training Excellence, South Africa and the Middle East. What I do for a living, basically, let's put it this way, I look at how do we actually change people's mindsets to become the best of who they really are. In other words, when people ask me what do, I tell them think about a computer, and a computer has certain software and programs, and like that we as human beings have software and programs. So we look at what programs serve you and what programs don't serve you. And the program that serves you well, we enhance that. So I work with them in order to enhance their leadership skills, because those are the programs that serve them. But the ones that don't serve them, example, some of their limiting beliefs that they might have, we look at how do we uninstall those programs and reinstall new programs to serve them better. So in other words, what I do is working with people to be able to become the best of who they are, because that's how I've learned to become the best of who I am. Being the baby of 13 children, coming from a home in Lenasia, south of Johannesburg, growing up 13 children in a 2-bedroom home, mum and dad working extremely hard. Remember, being the baby, I only saw the end of their struggles, but the beginning of some of their successes. But then I had older brothers and sisters that I was growing up with, some of whom already started moving out of the house and started getting married. And of course, my younger siblings we were part of the younger ones, were still part of the home. So although it was 2 bedrooms, we were sometimes 8 to 9 children in a 2-bedroom home with mum and dad. And then yes, we did have challenges as we were younger, mum and dad financial challenges. But also, I think if I can go a little more back, I'm the baby of 13 children, but my dad had 2 wives. So from my mum's side, we are 8 children, and the balance of the 5 kids comes from my dad's first wife. And here's the ironic part, is I always tell my husband today that I will never allow him to marry another woman, but my mum and my dad's first wife lived in one house, brought all 13 children up together. But while my mum was pregnant with me, my dad's first wife passed away giving birth to another child. The child was stillborn and gave birth, and apparently she was the pillar of not just my mum's children, but her children all combined. And when she passed away, I think all the kids felt it. So when my mum actually gave birth to me, I was named after her. So here's the ironic part, is that my mum named me after my dad's first wife. And today's life, you'll never ever have that. And I always told my husband, you'll never get that. So my dad was very entrepreneurial, extremely entrepreneurial. He was named for selling ice in winter. So everybody would say he would be able to sell ice in winter all the time. And I think because of that, I might have picked up that from him as well. I always wanted to have my own business. I always wanted to really excel. But then I looked at my mum, and my mum actually was the pillar behind my dad's success as well, together with even his first wife, because if I looked at and we used to call her Ma, so I'll say mum and Ma. So they basically had their own business running, and they would make things from home, and dad would go onto the road and sell. So he would go out to the farm areas, to the rural areas, and he would actually sell the goods that mum and my Ma would actually make. And because of that, I grew up in this environment that the women were actually the pillar behind the success of many of our men. And I always looked at that as a kind of a courage for me, but I also looked at it from a negative perspective as well, because I saw my mum, and remember, I never saw much of my ma, but I saw mum, and she worked extremely hard. I mean, she would wake up at 3 in the morning and start mixing what we were selling, which was sweetmeats. So in the Indian term, it's called mithai. It's used at every function and weddings, funerals, people would have it as a sweet dish. Even our celebration of Eid. So it was a necessity for everybody to have that, and that's what my dad would go on the road and sell. So they would make like little burfi pieces, jalebi. They are all Indian names for the sweet dishes. And I would see them actually working extremely hard. My mum would wake up at like 3 in the morning to mix the mixture, because by 7 o'clock my dad had to be out on the road selling, and she would make it really fresh, and she believed in quality of what they actually made. And I think that's where I got my precision from, extremely pedantic about what I do and how I do it, because everything had to be fresh. So she would wake up in the morning, do that, and as I got older, My job was to do the wrapping, or my job was to help with the mixing. So I'd wake up with her. So as much as it was giving me a kind of a motivation to be and do what they did, I also started learning to say, what can I learn from that experience was that I wanted to do things more smarter. I didn't want to work hard. I wanted to work smart. And that was my motivation to be able to do that. I grew up in an environment which was very competitive. My brother and I, who was only 1 year's difference from each other, was always competing for attention of my parents, because we were the last two in the house out of 13. And in my last teenage years, it was just the two of us, because everyone else was already married, gone out of the house. And by then, there was a bit of success in my dad's career, because his business picked up. He was one of the best suppliers of the sweetmeats in the industry. Everybody knew the name Lachka Sweetmeats. And of course, he was really doing exceptionally well. And I could see the growth, and I wanted to be part of this growth. So Saturdays basically is where I used to go as a teenager, go and stand outside butcheries and go and help him sell the actual sweetmeat. So I not only started helping mum make it, but I started learning how to actually go and market and how to sell. And like I said, Dad could sell ice in winter. So people who never ever ate sweets because they had diabetes, he would actually design and develop sweetmeats that didn't have sugar in it. Now, how does sweetmeats not have sugar in it? And people would actually come out and buy that, because he would come up with the concept and he would actually sell it. And that gave me the motivation that I could actually do more. And that's how I actually started getting officially into business. As I grew older, I, of course, was forced to go to school. I was a very naughty child. I didn't want to go to school. And eventually I realized that schooling was going to get me where I wanted. But I also found that the schooling system put us into a kind of a system which, if I wanted to deviate and do something differently, it wouldn't allow me to do it. So I was always going against the grain, finding things to do outside the schooling curriculum. I excelled in sports. I love sports. So I used to break the high jump record and the long jump record. So the long legs I had always allowed me to pay it forward. Unfortunately, time wasn't good enough for my dad and them to send all their kids to university, but I had that opportunity. So out of the 13 children, I had the opportunity to go to university out of all of them, 1 out of 13. And because I was entrepreneurial, academics wasn't my state. So I went for the first year, cheated, got through the process, and gave my dad false results to say that I passed. But deep down, I knew I didn't. So the first year of when I actually finished matric, I had somebody come and talk to us at the school about what banking is about. And my interest immediately went in there, because that was a stepping stone. I got employed by the bank 16 days after I qualified from my matric year. Got into the banking environment and I loved it. I got to learn concepts and ideas and meet with people, because my dad was very staunch. So I basically, in my life before that, I was only knowing my family and my friends and colleagues and couldn't meet with others. And when I actually got into the working environment, I love working with people, and that's where I found my passion for working with people. And then the bank started going through changes. But in that time, I also found the love of my life, and I got married. My partner, Rashid, I had a personal dream of always finding the right man. So in my career expanding, because I became senior in the position, I was studying as part of becoming a train-the-trainer. I met my husband, got married, and in that process, I grew even further. And during that time, I had my very first son, who basically was born. And it was at that time that I felt I wanted to leave the bank, because I wanted to stay home to look after him. And until he grew up, I thought I will then go back. But I didn't realize later that when I made that decision, it was an unconscious decision, because at that time we thought our son was perfectly healthy and well. But when I stayed home with him in the first 3 months, I realized that he wasn't well. And doctors told us that he will not live till 3. And at that point, I had already left the bank when I was at the peak of my career. So I decided to stay home and see to my son. And that's when I found out that he was not well. We then sought, because it was my first child, I was 22 years of age. I had all the fears, all the frustrations, because I always had a dream, like I said, meet the perfect man, have the perfect family. Remember, I come from a very big family, and it was always a dream to have that. And even though we were a big family, we had our ups, we had our downs. But when we had our downs, I learned from those downs to say, I will never do this in my family. And I was looking forward to start doing that. And I think the knock hit me when we went one day to the doctor and they ran some test and they said, Hawa, I'm sorry, but he's got a terminal illness where he won't live till the age of 2. So as a young mother, you don't question, you don't ask, because this is a medical doctor who's qualified and they're now telling you this. And I kind of believed it at that moment in time. And sometimes when I look back, I actually think that sometimes believing it allowed me to be able to find the easy way out. But anyway, despite that, I did that. And in that time, I was going through aggression, through frustration. And Rashid, who's my mentor and coach, who's my life partner, came to me and he said, one of the questions I asked, he said, why me? I've had a perfect career. It's going well. I'm growing in the bank. And now this, and I have a child. I thought everything was perfect. And his question to me was, Hawa, why not you? What makes you so special over and above everyone else? Do you wish this on your mother? Do you wish this on your sister? Do you wish this on anyone else? And I said, no, I don't. And eventually I then took from that and I said, okay, I'm going to push through. And as we went through, I said, okay, my son is here. I know I can still work, so I want to do something part-time. I want 2 hours a day just for me. That will help me to be able to rework. And that's when I got back into the working area. And going back into the working environment, I took out 2 hours of lectures. I learned how to work. At that time, Microsoft was not even there. We did Word Perfect, we did Lotus 1, 2, 3, never knew how to work on a computer. And I said, there's my learning opportunity. And I learned and I developed. And from there, I started teaching it. So I worked in a training company. And the surprising thing is the first company that gave me a job was a company that had for special needs adults. And I had to train in special needs. And yeah, I thought I'm getting away from a child who has a special need and going into an adult environment. But then I didn't know it then, but I know it now that that was my learning process to be able to deal with my own trauma. When my son was 21 months, he got very sick and he passed away, unfortunately. Like doctors predicted, he wasn't going to live till 2. It hit me very hard, and my ex-HR director knew me very well, and he came to me and says, Hawa, come back to work. And that's when I decided to go back to First National Bank. By that time, I'd worked myself up the ladder where I actually got a very senior position in the training division. But that's the time the bank was going through changes. And at that moment in time, we had to all reapply for our positions. I got a position as HR director. We were only 1 out of 5 of us that were selected out of 16 people. The rest were redeployed. So I was very excited about it. But when I got to that position of sitting behind a desk and solving HR issues, and that wasn't who I am. I love training. So I went up to them. I came home actually crying. And again, my mentor and coach, Rashid, came to me and says, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to have my own training company. And he said, so what's stopping you? And I said, well, nothing really. And that's when I decided I'm going to go and pitch to First National Bank that they are going to be outsourcing their training, so why not outsource to me? Collected my 10 years of pension money from them. We decided to go on pilgrimage with my husband Rashid. No kids, no other responsibilities. Went away for 8 weeks. But in the meantime, I sent out a business proposition to the bank to say, I've now resigned, collected my pension, but I'll be going on my own, and this is my training company, and that's where training excellence began. And when I came back, I'll never forget, it was a Tuesday, my father-in-law came to me and he said, Hawa, there's some messages for you, please, they've been hunting, trying to call you down. And when I actually went in, they called me and they said, Hawa, we have a first training program for you. First 10 people for IT training started off in my home for 10 people where I put up PCs and we started training. And that was the beginning of training excellence. Till today, First National, together with a few other clients we have now built up, and training excellence has been in existence for almost 20 years. There are a few challenges for me while running the business, and if I can go into some of those challenges, one particularly is I was running a business at a time where I had no capital. I remember I took the pension money and I went on pilgrimage because I felt more strong about that. So I had no computers, I had no venue, I had nothing that I could work from. So what I actually started doing is opening up my mind to various possibilities. And I started saying, okay, what can we do? And I looked at what we had. And I said, we have a home, but the home is not being utilized fully. So let's take part of it and turn it into offices. Went to First National and said, do you have venues? So what I found is just opening up my mind to various things helped me to solve those particular challenges. Finance was an issue. So my husband and my partner was actually working for a company. He's an accountant, so working for a company and earning income, that kept the business, the living style going. And he allowed me to be able to function. So for me, the big thing is that I had support and I wasn't afraid to ask for that support. The challenge is that when we have support, we don't ask for the support. One is my husband, the other is family. And in that time I built the business, I also realized that the other challenge was I was still going through trauma of losing one son. But as I started building the business, I fell pregnant with my second daughter, and then the challenge was that now what do? Do I leave work or do I move on? And I had to weigh the pros and cons of that. So the challenges of a woman, in particular in business, is always going to be family versus your career. And for me, I decided to look at what was negotiable and what was not. So in life since then, one of my learning things was I have two trays in my life: what's negotiable and what's non-negotiable. And for me, my kids were non-negotiable. My husband was non-negotiable, but my career was also non-negotiable. So what was negotiable? Negotiable was to be able to negotiate time with support mentors, support family members who can help me with the kids, who can help me with my cooking, who can help me with the home. Because people say women can't have it all. I believe we can if we are able to learn how to negotiate. If we don't know how to negotiate, we're not able to do it. So those challenges for me as a woman was the biggest thing that I felt was holding me back at the time. And until I started understanding that I am human, I'm not a superwoman, I am going to need help, I can't do this myself, then I negotiated that. So for me, those were some of the challenges. And of course, the other big challenge is when my daughter was born, and a few months later she was diagnosed with the exact same condition that my son. And the doctor said, "Oh, I'm sorry, she won't live till 2." But here's the thing. A few years down the line, 3 years down the line, I have learned that nobody will ever dictate to me again and put a price tag or put a date, expiry date, on a child that I love so much. And that is where I learned that if I change my mindset, I can change the outcome. And the moment I did that, I sought all over the world. I researched. We traveled to Belgium. We traveled to Kerala, to coaching, to look for not a cure, but to give her quality of life. And yes, eventually she succumbed, but she succumbed at the age of 8 years old. She lived till 8. Till today, doctors can't explain how, but I know deep down inside it's because I, as a mother, never decided to give up. I also knew what was in my non-negotiable. The non-negotiable was always my kids. The non-negotiable was always my career. So even when I went to the office, they came with me. Because 3 years after she was born, I had my third son, Mohammed Uwais, who was born. Another challenge because he was diagnosed with the exact same condition. Again, doctors said he won't survive. So based on that, I said, this is not going to happen. But I knew what was in my non-negotiable. My career was in non-negotiable, but so was my family. So all I really did was starting to negotiate. I negotiated with family members who sometimes said, I can't help, and that was okay because that was their world. They didn't know what to do. And I negotiated then with someone else. I had friends that would come over and help to sit at the hospital for 1-2 hours while I went out to go and see a client. Or for the day that I had training, Rashid will come in and he will sit with the children. I negotiated with Rashid. He learned how to cook in that time. He learned how to change napkins in the time. He learned how to feed. I learned how to feed because we were feeding through a gastrostomy tube. Those were all the challenges. But the one thing that I've learned throughout all of that, if you set your mind to something that is non-negotiable in your life, you will find a way. And you will find the negotiables to help you achieve what you need to achieve.